Hi, my name's Hannah and I work for J Parker's. I'm just going to show you how to do a bulb lasagna. So this is a spring one. So this is a really good way to get lots of colour in a very small space. So if you've got a small garden or a balcony garden or something like that, this is a really good idea for you to get some spring colour into your garden. So this pot here is probably the smallest size I would go to if possible. You need quite a big pot just so that you can get 2 or 3 layers of bulbs in here and plant them at the right depth. So I've filled it about a third, maybe halfway up with compost, and I've mixed some grit into here for drainage as well. And then I'll start off with my first layer. So for this bulb lasagna, I've decided to use daffodils, hyacinths and crocuses, which will all flower at a similar time, so you'll get multiple layers of colour in one pot. You can do it so that you have 3 different flowering periods. If you just want one pot that will flower at 3 different times, then that's a good use of your sort of time as well. So you only have to plant one pot and you'll get maybe 4 or 5 months out of it if you plant in 3 seasons worth of bulbs in there. But for this one, it's just 3 different sort of types of bulb that will flower at a similar time. So my first one is a daffodil called Winston Churchill. So I'm going to plant this one first. This is the tallest bulb and the biggest bulb, so I'm going to put it in first right at the bottom. So again, you want to plant it the right way up, so pointy end facing upwards and flat end at the bottom. So I'm going to put these in first. And spacing wise, I'm just going to leave a little bit of a gap in between each one. And I'll show you that after I've popped them all in here. Okay, so this is what my first layer looks like. So they're pretty well spaced. And what I'm going to do now is cover that with a layer of compost, just enough to cover them, and then I'll do my second layer. So I've just used, as I said earlier, multi-purpose peat-free compost for this bulb lasagna. You can buy bulb fibre, but I just think that if you've already got some multi-purpose compost lying around, you might as well use it and save a bit of money. Okay, so that's my thin layer of compost, so you can't see the daffodil bulbs anymore. So for my next layer, I'm going to use hyacinths. So this is just a top-sized hyacinth mix, so there's multiple colours in here, so that will brighten up this pot a lot. So again, you want to plant this the right way up, so it's pointy end facing upwards, flat end facing down, and these are a little bit bigger, so I'm going to space these a little bit more. So I'm just going to pop these in now. Okay, so there's a little bit more of a gap in between these, just because they need a little bit more space. And I'm just going to, again, cover them with multi-purpose compost, and then we can do our last layer. So for this next layer, I'm going to put a little bit more compost in between, because my next one that I'm going to use is a crocus, so I don't want to plant those too deep, otherwise they won't come up. Okay, so my next one, I'll just show you so that's nice and flat again now, you can't see the hyacinth bulbs at all. And my next one is going to be a large flowering crocus. So these will come up in the spring as well, so you're looking at sort of February, March onwards. And they look like this. So again, you can't tell too much with a crocus, but there is still a slightly pointed end and a flat side, so you want to make sure that they're this way up. And I'm going to pretty much use all the crocuses in this top layer, because it's quite a big pot. You can get away with using a lot more than you would in a smaller one, just for a bit more of an impact. So I'm just going to use all of the crocuses that I've got left here. Right, so I didn't end up using all of them, I ran out of space, but there you go. So that's now my last layer. So this is fully planted now. So you've got 3 layers in here, you could do 2. If you had a really big pot, you could even do more if you wanted, but I'm just gonna finish that with the final layer of compost and then top it with grit. So the reason that I like to top it with grit, which I've said in other videos, is to just try and keep the slugs and snails at bay as much as possible, just because as soon as the weather starts to warm up and get wetter in the spring, that brings the slugs and snails out, and they'll try and get at your first shoots, and then they tend to ruin your display. So if you cover it with grit, you're sort of putting them off. So the best time of year to do this, it can depend a little bit on what bulbs you're planting, but for this one, September, October, because I'm using all sort of the early flowering things. But if you wanted to use tulips in here, you could plant this up sort of October, November time, so it's a little bit later. Tulips just have a bit more of a tendency to rot off if the soil or the weather's still a bit too warm. Tulips just have a bit more of a tendency to rot off, so we tend to do them a little bit later when it's a bit colder. Okay, so that's pretty even now. Okay, and then again, I'm just going to top this off with grit, and then you're pretty much done. Okay. Just spread that out. You want quite a thick layer, just so there's no compost showing. Okay, and then all you'd want to do now is label that up so you know that it's your bulb lasagna. Put that wherever you want it to go, so you don't have to move it around too much, as it'll get quite heavy as it starts to get wet with the rain. And then at least you know what's in here, and then you can just pop it somewhere sheltered, and that'll start coming up in the spring for you.